Hi guys, it's Courtney, and today's video is part of a hop to celebrate the second birthday for Trinity Stamps. And if you guys have ever seen my channel before, you know how much I love Trinity Stamps. So the theme is Slimline cards. So we're going to be making a Slimline card using the new Best Wishes stamp set. And I have a panel here cut with the stitched panel, also by Trinity Stamps. This comes in a set of 3, and this is the medium size one. So I'm bringing out my Misty here, lining up my cake and adding one of the candles to it. And I don't want to stamp the cake yet. I just want to stamp the candle, but I put my cake there just for placement reasons. Went ahead and stamped out the little candle twice. Then I'm just going to take a piece of Post-it note tape. You can use masking paper, but I didn't bother to get a whole sheet of masking paper for this. And I'm going to stamp out the candle twice on that to create 2 little masks, because obviously it's Trinity's second birthday, so we're going to be adding 2 candles to the top of the cake. So I'm going to reposition that little candle right next to the other one. Now, my stamp was a little bit damp still because I had cleaned it off with my stamp chamois. And so if you just let this sit for a minute, it will kind of dry up. It might look a little bit blotchy, but once we actually do our coloring, you're not really going to be able to tell. So I masked out the first little candle there, and you can see that I didn't even bother cutting out the top because that's not the area that I need to be masked. So don't waste your time cutting out an entire mask if you don't need to. So I lined up the cake now, and I'm going to stamp that out with that same ink. And this is a huge image. I know this is a slimline card, so it makes it look a little bit smaller than it actually is. But if this was on an A2 card, this would pretty much take up the entire thing. So I stamped this a total of 3 times because I really want a bold black outline on this. Then I can remove that from my Misty. I had a few smudges there, mainly probably from me. So I'm going to use my Tombow sand eraser just to get rid of those smudges. Now, I am going to take this line of sprinkles and I'm going to stamp that out onto the bottom and the top of the card panel just to kind of break up some of that white space, and we'll color those in later. Now, we're going to move on to the coloring here in just a minute, but in between takes here, or in between portions of the video, I spilled my coffee on this card. So I did have to restamp everything, so it might look a little bit different once I start coloring it, but it's pretty much the same. So for the frosting area of this cake, I want it to appear as if it's vanilla frosting. So anything white still has some shading, and this is a round object, so I want to make sure that I leave a very strong center highlight. So I'm bringing in some cool gray markers, and I'm starting with the C5 and just adding a few little flicks on either side, extending those areas out with the C3, C1, and then the C00, which is basically one step up from a colorless blender, but I'm still leaving some white space, and you can see how much dimension that actually gives the cake, and it still looks white. So I did that for the bottom layer as well. And for the sprinkles, for that frosting area, I'm going to add these little sprinkles. So there's 3 different stamps that you can use. You have this little bunch of sprinkles here that I'm kind of just scattering around, and then you have another stamp that has 3 little sprinkles, and I'm kind of just filling in the gaps wherever that may fit. And then there is 1 single sprinkle that I can fill in the smaller gaps with. That way I don't have, I kind of have more of a seamless pattern, at least somewhat, at least to the eye anyway. So I stamped those out with the blackout ink. You want to make sure that you are still using the Copic Safe ink for this. So next we are going to color in the actual cake part of it, and I want the cake to be chocolate. So I am going to bring in my E50 markers, which is my favorite combination to use for anything chocolate. And I'm going to go right in with my darkest color, and I'm going to color this pretty much the same way as I did for the frosting. I'm starting off with the E59, and I'm just adding a little bit of the shading on either side. And you just have to kind of be a little bit careful where the frosting is kind of hanging over the rest of the cake. If any of your color bleeds onto that, you will have to maybe go in with a colorless blender or even that C marker, one of the C markers, to get rid of that, because these are pretty, well, at least the E59 and 57, they're pretty dark, and the darker colors just tend to bleed a little bit more. So I'm going to save this center there for that E53, and I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom. Now you can see that I'm coloring directly over these letters, and I want the letters to appear as if it's kind of part of the cake. I guess this would also be frosting, but I want it to appear as if it is still part of the decoration of the cake. So I'm not bothering to go around them. I'm just going to color directly over them. And these are actually going to be chocolate as well. We're just going to change it up just a little bit. So again, leaving that center highlight for that E53. And for the letters, I want these to stand out just a little bit. So I'm going to switch over to an E18, which is more of a reddish tone, but it still looks like chocolate to me. But I just didn't want to use the E59 because then, especially on the edges of the card, you wouldn't really be able to see it. Not doing any shading to these letters at all. I am just filling them in solid, and we'll add a little bit more detail to those later on, but you can see that it does stand out against those E50 markers. So next we are going to start by adding some color to these sprinkles. And I wanted to keep with the colors for Trinity Stamps because this is their celebration and this is their birthday cake, I guess you could say. So I picked out 3 colors that are very similar to the 3 colors that are part of the Trinity logo, and they're pretty much BGs and Bs. And I'm just randomly coloring in these sprinkles. Now you can do shading. They're tiny. For the larger ones, I would imagine that you could probably fit 2 colors in, but I didn't want to take the chance. I have a very light background as far as the vanilla frosting goes, so I just didn't want to take the chance of my colors bleeding. So I'm just sticking to 1 single color for this. Now for the candles, I want this to also match my sprinkles and also match Trinity. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading to either side of the candles because obviously these are round objects. I'm only using 2 colors here. Don't bother to try to fit more. And for the little flames, I'm going to bring in an orange and a yellow. So I'm just adding 1 or 2 flicks right up the center with the orange and then filling in the rest with the yellow. That way we have a little bit of variation in that little flame. Now for the cake plate itself, I want this to look more silver or gray, I guess you could say, than white. So I'm still going to use my C markers just like I did for the vanilla frosting, but this time I'm going to bring in the C7 as my darkest color, and I'm going to skip the C00. But I am going to go all the way down to a C1, and that's only going to be for my highlight area, but you can see just with going 1 step darker makes a huge difference. This no longer looks like a white object like the frosting does. So for the rest of the sprinkles on the top and bottom of the card, I am going to pretty much do the same thing as I did for the sprinkles on the cake. I'm just going to use those same 3 colors. Again, you can certainly add shading to this, but I'm going to add a little bit more detail to the sprinkles as well later on. So I'm really not too concerned about the shading at this point. So once all of my coloring was complete, I'm taking the largest panel from that same stitched, I guess you could call it a stitched rectangle die set, and I'm just going to take one of the blue-green colors that I use just to color the edges. You don't need a ton of colored cardstock when you're just using them for mats. You can color them any color you want them. So I'm going to glue my main panel onto this one with my Tombow Mono Multi Glue, and it looks like I use colored cardstock. I also glued this on to my card base. Again, just leaving a little bit of a border there with the white really makes your panel pop, being this is a pretty clean and simple card, even though it is a slimline card. So next I wanted to add all of my detail. So I am going to start with my words, my best wishes. I'm going to bring in my glossy accents. Now I know that there's a fine line tip that you can get. Probably would have come in handy for this, but I didn't have too much of a problem. These letters are pretty skinny, but once it starts kind of flowing out, you don't need to squeeze the bottle. You kind of just go along, and you want to move somewhat quickly because the glossy accents is going to come out of that bottle faster than you can actually write with it. And it will get a little bit globby, especially towards the end. As I reached the end of the wishes word, I could tell that I was definitely going out of the lines on this word because it was just flowing a little bit quicker than I could keep up with. But before it dries, in fact, right after you add that, you can just kind of pick up any excess that is hanging off the letters, or maybe merging the two letters. And I'm using just a craft knife, and I'm either picking it up or I'm kind of shoving it where it needs to go. So I'm just kind of moving it over onto the letter itself, if that makes any sense. So instead of using the glossy accents on the sprinkles, because I figured the sprinkles are even smaller than these letters, I am going to bring out the Morning Dew Nouveau drops, which are basically just clear Nouveau drops. You don't want to use them in large areas because they tend to crack it tends to crack as it dries. So the sprinkles are fine, but if you were to fill in a large area like we sometimes do with glossy accents, you may get some cracking. So I wouldn't recommend it for large areas. So once that was filled in, I did add some shimmer just to the frosting area with a Nouveau Aqua Shimmer pen. And then, of course, because Trinity Stamps is the absolute best when it comes to embellishments, I did have to add a few embellishments as well. And these embellishments are amazing. They look like diamonds. And I know they're plastic, but they look like diamonds. And they have a variety of different sizes in this set. And I'm just adhering these down with some multi-medium matte. I think that's what it's called, by Ranger, but I'll link it below. And I just kind of scattered those throughout. And that is it. That is the card. All of the information for the hop will be in the description box below, as well as all of the supplies that I used and the next step on the hop. Congratulations to Tanisa and the Trinity Tribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.